blood vessels are channels that carry blood throughout your body. So they form a closed loop, like a circuit that begins and ends at your heart. Blood flows coming from the heart and then goes back to the heart. Function of our blood vessels, and together the heart, vessels, and blood vessels from your circulatory system. Now, let's start with this picture here, as we can see in that diagram. The red one, that's oxygenated blood. Then the blue one, that's deoxygenated. Always remember, when we talk about arteries, that's carrying blood away from the heart. And then the vein goes back to the heart. These capillaries, it's just very tiny vessels for the gas exchange occur in here. The carbon dioxide, oxygen, nutrients, and waste are being transported in here and being exchanged. So artery, as we know, it carries blood away from the heart. And then we have this ventral aorta. Remember these three? We have this ventral aorta. We have this dorsal aorta. And then aortic arcs. Now let's proceed to our ventral aorta and our arcs. Afferent bronchial artery lead into the gills from the aortic arcs. So blood then flows through the gills through collector loops, and the oxygenated blood travels into the efferent bronchial arteries, which continue into the dorsal aorta. So here's the picture of our fish. As we can see, this is how the blood being circulated throughout the body. So it starts with the heart. So the heart, in this area here, the blue one, that's the oxygenated blood. So that's our ventral aorta. Then the upper one, which is the red in color, which is oxygenated blood, that will be our dorsal aorta. Now, what is the afferent bronchial artery? So let's start with the anatomy of this fish. So we can see here the body capillaries, where the gas exchange occurs. We have the red one, as I said earlier, that's our oxygenated blood. And then the blue veins, oxygen poor. So this area here, that's our heel capillaries. So that's where our arcs located. So this one, the gills, the function of that is to diffuse the water, the oxygen in the water. So since they are fish, so they take up the water inside the gills, and then as the water flows, the gills, the process of this gill capillaries is to diffuse the water and get the oxygen and then leave the excess carbon dioxide. So that's in the arcs, of course. So here in these arcs or the gill capillaries, we can divide this one or subdivide this into three. So the area near the ventral, that's our afferent bronchial artery. So as we go here, so this one, remember, that's our afferent. Then the gill capillaries or the arcs. And the next to it is our efferent, in which oxygenated blood is being here. And then it will transport into the dorsal aorta and then throughout the body. The capillaries or the gill capillaries. So the blood capillaries in the gill filaments are close to the gill surface to take up oxygen from the water to the operculum, and then its arcs or the gill arcs, and then that's where they take up water to get oxygen, and then the excess carbon dioxide to the water. Afferent bronchial artery. So we know already where our afferent, and then the gill capillaries, and then next to it is the efferent bronchial arteries. So it serves as to return oxygenated blood from the gills, and then this blood is distributed throughout the body by the help of this dorsal aorta, which carries oxygenated blood. So that's how we subdivide it in the gill capillaries or the arcs. So that's where we find this afferent and then efferent. Now, teleos 1 and 2 are gone. So teleos, those are large group of fish, which is a ray-finned fish, because in the sixth arc or in the efferent arc or in the efferent bronchial artery, there is an emerging structure. So that's our pulmonary artery. So later on we'll be discussing how is this being useful for our lungfish. Now, what is an aortic arc? So here we can say that they have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6 arc. So as we notice that Ileus lost 1 and 2. So the first aortic, we call that one as our, or the first arc, we call that one as our mandibular arc, in which that's the jaw of the fish. Second arc, hyoid arc. So the third, and then a fourth and a fifth, and then the sixth, those are our aortic arc. So what is an aortic arc? The aortic arcs are the blood vessels that supply the pharyngeal arch, and they serve as a communication between the ventral and the dorsal aorta. So as we can see, what are the linkage between the two, or what connect the ventral and then our dorsal aorta? That's our arcs. So that's the function of these arcs. So they are formed mainly from neural crest cells. So the ventral aorta is the main artery into which the truncus arteriosus leads. So it bifurcates, so meaning it branches into two, into the left and the right vessels, which extend forward as the paired external carotids, and paired dorsal aorta extend forward as the internal carotids. So here we can notice that the yellow one, which signifies as our internal carotid artery, and then that's internal carotid artery will lead or will get the blood from the brain, to carry blood from the brain. Well, there's this external carotid artery that will be our external head structure. So it goes there directly to our external head structure. So basic plan of aortic arcs. So here in this side, it is a primitive or the basic pattern of the aortic arc. So as we can see, it is really complete. There is 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 arc, and then a afferent and efferent bronchial. So this one is really the basic pattern. So we can see here the mandibular arc, the hyoid arc, which is the 2, then the remaining 3 and 4, the remaining are our aortic arcs. So here the afferent bronchial artery, which carries deoxygenated blood from our ventral aorta, and then in the capillaries gas exchange occurs, and then efferent bronchials goes directly to the dorsal, and then throughout the body carrying oxygenated blood. The heart, so as blood goes away or carry the blood away from the heart, it goes out in the conus arteriosus, and then this area here, or this aortic arc, as we can see, then the ventral aorta, in which carries the oxygenated, and then goes to the afferent, and then the capillaries, and then the efferent, and then our dorsal aorta. The dorsal aorta carrying oxygenated blood throughout the body. Now we proceed to this modification of aortic arc in different vertebrates. In tetrapod, it's starting to change. There, 1 and 2 are gone, and then new structure of pulmonary arteries. In life, we notice that they are the same, or the fundamental plan or the basic pattern is still there. But once they go through an adult species, we notice that some are changing. Most especially in different vertebrates, there are changes. Factors that affect these changes is, of course, the environmental change. So evolution, natural selection, there are survive in that area, in the sea, due to lack of food, or maybe lack of resources, or there are maybe many competition. So the things that species need to do is to change its environment. So it goes to that area, there must be a changes in the body, since the gills, so they need gills in the water, but then they change to another location, to the land, so the gills is no longer in use. There is a progressive reduction of aortic arc in the vertebrates during evolution. For fish, in teleos, those are the groups of ray-finned fish. In teleos, there are 4 pairs of aortic arcs. As we can see, 1, 2, 3, 4 pair remaining. Why? Because the first one, since in the embryonic life it's present, but once they go into process of being an adult, it changes or it's gone. So the first one, that's our mandibular, that's the jaw. Mandibular arc is gone. The second one, the hyoid arc, is lost. Fish. Okay, so among dipnoans, there are 4 or 5 aortic arcs that develop from the ventral aorta, which supply blood from the gills. The arcs, like the fish, have afferent and efferent division. So they have 2 pulmonary arteries which develop from the efferent division of the 6th arc. So in the lungfish, always remember that in this area, in the efferent bronchial arteries, in which it carries oxygenated blood, there in this arc, the 6th arc, there is something developing in there, and that's our pulmonary artery. So as it gets the oxygenated blood from the exchange happens in the capillaries, and then it goes to the lungs, which carries in this pulmonary artery, carries oxygenated blood. Now let's proceed in the amphibia. We have our urodele, which is our salamanders, and then our anuran, which is our frogs. So let's start with this urodele. They modified because they went to that area, or they live in that certain area, and then due to some competition, many predators, and then the scarce of food, they went to the land. So they changed their environment. So appearance of the gills is lost because they directly breathe in. Their body is in the state of changing, also modifying in order for them to adapt in the new environment. Now in urodeles, there are external gills present as respiratory organs in addition to lungs. The 3, 4, and then 5 and 6 aortic arcs are present, though the 5th arc or the 5th pair is much reduced in Sirene, Amphimua, and Necturus. Notice the 3 and 4 here. This one, they are connected, so they are named ductus caroticus. So I told you that this is very advantage because they can go, the 3 or 4 can go towards the tail, go towards the head, and then the 4th arc also can do that way. So the next one, the 6th aortic arcs from the pulmocutaneous arc, or the artery on either side, taking blood to the lungs and skin. So that's the use of this arc here. So it developed pulmonary arc. Now it is also retained in connection with the lateral dorsal aorta, known as ductus arteriosus, to our anuran. Larva stage, its structure of this aortic arc is the same with the adult urodele because of the presence of the gills. At metamorphosis, with the loss of gills, what is lost? The 1, 2, and then the 5th aortic arcs disappear. Only the remaining the 3rd, the 4th, and then the 6th aortic arcs are present. The ductus caroticus, the linkage between the 3 and 4 is being lost. Now the 4th aortic arc along its lateral dorsal aorta forms the systemic arc. So the upper one forms an carotid arc, then the lower part in the 4th arc, it is formed by the systemic arc. Now the 6th aortic arc becomes the pulmocutaneous arc, supplying venous blood to the lungs and skin. So the ductus arteriosus disappears during metamorphosis. Thus, adult anurans have only 3, 4, and 6 aortic arcs. So these are also retained by amniotes. So aves. So that's the bird. Now in birds, as we notice here, the 3, 4 aortic arcs are present. So with the complete division of the ventricle into 2 parts, the conus arteriosus and the ventral aorta have split to form 2 vessels. The systemic aorta arising from the left ventricle here, and pulmonary aorta from the right ventricle. Now, third aortic arc with the remnants of lateral and ventral aortae forms the carotids, which arise from the systemic aorta. So, fourth aortic arc from the systemic aorta on the right side on mammals. In mammals, also the third, the fourth, and then the sixth aortic arcs persist. So, the conus arteriosus and ventral aorta split to form two vessels. First one, a systemic aorta rising from the left ventricle and the pulmonary aorta from the right ventricle. So the third aortic arcs with remnants of lateral and ventral aortae forms the carotid arc. We are done with our ventral aorta. Let's move on to the dorsal aorta. Always remember that the dorsal aorta, it carries oxygenated blood. Ventral visceral branches. So we have this one here, that's our celiac axis. So the use of this axis, it's gonna supply more anterior visceral structure such as the stomach, this one, the liver, and then our pancreas. So the celiac axis, it branches here. So we call the branch that going to the liver, we call that one as our hepatic branch. Going to the stomach, that's our gastric branch. Going to this, to our spleen, that will be our splenic mesenteric artery. So what is mesenteric artery? It supplies intestine. Now, mesenteric artery, typically a cranial mesenteric, if we have a small intestine, so we call that one our cranial mesenteric. If small intestine, if big or large intestine in a mammals, we call that one as caudal. So caudal, inferior, cranial, superior. The subclavian that supports the arm. We have the left and then the right subclavian. So the left subclavian coming of the arc to the aorta. Then the right subclavian goes to the branchial cephalic. So there are three branches in here. So one of that branch is our subclavian. So it passes through the body wall and then it becomes axillary, which means our armpit here, which means the armpit, which start down the arm region, becomes branchial as it support the arm. Now let's proceed with our branches of common iliac artery, supplies the leg, veins. We already know that our veins start in the capillary bed and then end in the heart. So veins, it carries oxygenated blood. Now from the capillary bed, in which the gas exchange will change into oxygenated blood, so the oxygenated blood will then goes toward the heart. So that's our vein. Different kind of stream. The first stream, the cardinal stream. Now we have in this cardinal stream shark, so common cardinal vein. So what is this common cardinal vein? This common cardinal vein, we have the first one. We'll be discussing about the common anterior cardinal vein. Anterior cardinal vein, which means it drains the head. So the upper region or the head region, it drains the blood and it drains the head. While in the posterior cardinal or the postcardinal vein drains kidney, body wall, gonads, and most of body except our digestive tract. So the shark, the head of the region of the head in the shark will goes into anteriorly into anterior cardinal vein and then will go to the sinus venosus, in which it is located at the bottom of the heart. So it received all of the blood. Now also in this posterior cardinal, all that is in the posterior area or the lower part will go in this sinus venosus. So it will go to that common cardinal vein and will receive in that our sinus venosus. So the area here, so the upper one here, this one, that's where our heart located. Okay, so as I tell you, so this picture below shows that this is our anterior cardinal, in which directly goes to the head region. It drains the head. The posterior will drain the kidney, body walls, gonads, and most of the body except our digestive tract. and then in this area, the sinus venosus, and these two here, that's our common cardinal vein. Now I have an illustration here. So I have this one picture of our shark. Okay, so sinus venosus, as we notice here, that's where the blood, that's where it receives all the region, the head region, and then the tail region of our shark. So this is in color blue because it carries the oxygenated blood. Now it goes to this area here where it meets the capillary bed, and it will go to the heart carrying oxygenated blood. Now let's proceed in our amphibians. Most of postcardinal disappears in anurans but persists in urodeles. We have here an example. So this one is the basic embryonic pattern, which it is complete. As we can see, this area here, the green one, that will be our common cardinal vein. So in this area here, the center, and then the heart here is located. This is called our sinus venosus, where it gets the blood from the head and then the tail. So that is the deoxygenated blood. So it goes back to the heart carrying oxygenated blood because of the capillary bed in which there is a gas exchange occur. Now we amphibians, most of the postcardinals disappears in anurans but persist in urodeles. So as we can see that this one here, that's the postcardinal. So that one in anurans disappears. If it is disappearing in this area, so what will happen next? What will happen to the structure? Is there a new vessels that will form? We have here our amniotes, post cava, or we can call this one as inferior vena cava, caudal vena cava. So it takes the place of the postcardinal vein. Okay, as we can see that in amphibians, anurans, there is a disappearing of postcardinal in our anurans. But this post cava, since there is a disappearing of postcardinal vein, so there must be a new vessels that will form. So that will be our post cava. So takes the place of the postcardinal vein. So it will drain some of the hind limbs in crocodiles, all of the hind limbs in mammals, and eventually drains most of the trunk and tail in addition to hind limbs. So as we can see here, we have our turtle, we have the crocodile, and then we have our bird. So the green one, that's our postcardinal. So as you can see in this basic pattern here, or that's an embryonic pattern. So the postcardinal is there still present, but due to the modification, the postcardinal is missing or lost, but there is something new emerged. So that's our post cava. Here, there is no postcardinal, but only post cava. Now, in mammals, as we can see, this one is the leg of the mammals, this one is the leg. So the green one here, that serves as our post cava. Now, if that's the post cava and then this one is the pre cava, where is this coming from? So as we know, this pre cava is from the common cardinal vein. But since there is a modification, since it is present, still it is present in the embryonic life or the basic pattern, it is still present in embryonic life, but due to the changes of the organisms for transforming into an adult, so there is a changes. So that's our pre-cava, or our pre-cava, it was our common cardinal vein in the embryonic life. So later I'll be discussing that one. So here in this area, the green one, if there is something wrong happen, or there is an injury in the post cava where it cannot transport blood going to the heart, so it will have an alternate route. It will look for another route or direction. So where can we locate that one? Here, this one. We call that one as our azygos vein. So azygos vein, that's the remnants of our postcardinal. As we remember in the basic pattern, postcardinal is present, but due to the changes, it then becomes a azygos. So what will happen is that if post cava is being damaged or cannot transport well because of the injury, the azygos, as are the remnants of the post cardinal, it serves as another direction. So there is no excuse that we cannot transport blood from our heart, because this area is very useful. We can go here directly and then go to the precava and then to our heart, only in mammals. Okay, so another thing is that I did not include here in our presentation, but this area here, the precava, or shall we call in another term, it is superior vena cava, cranial vena cava. So this area here, that's the common cardinal vein, from the common cardinal vein that we saw in the fish. So once we get to your amniotes, is now precava. So it is no longer a common cardinal vein, but it will then become our precava. Now, two common cardinal veins in shark, once get to the mammals, only one precava. So the other one is lost. So only one is remaining for our mammals. In cats and humans, right precava persists and lost the left. Are the reptiles' abdominal stream. I include only reptiles here, but there is really a difference between any other vertebrates. Okay, so the reptiles here, in this violet in color, we can see that there is a paired abdominal vein. So no connection to the forelimb. Only hind limb, renal portal, as we can see this one here, the renal portal system in the post cava or the hind limb goes to this lateral abdomen and get back to the heart. So no connection to the forelimbs. So in mammals, in fetus, we have this abdominal stream. As we are born already, we don't have an abdominal stream. Okay, why? In fetus or in fetal stage, there is an umbilical cord that connects with the mother and the babies. Have this hepatic portal stream and hepatic sinuses. So we already know that hepatic, it's the liver. No, so the portal in just normal vein, it start in the capillary bed and will end in the heart. But this portal, it will start and it will end to the capillary bed only. So here, all vertebrates have this, similar in all. Now, what is a sinus? Sinus, that's referring to the veins. Now, we have here hepatic portal stream. So this one, we have the vitelline vein from the yolk sac to heart early in the development. So it is in the embryonic stage or embryonic life. So here in this portion, that will be our vitelline vein. So it gets the nutrients in this area in the yolk sac and then deliver it to the heart. Now the subintestinal vein from the digestive visceral. For the basic embryonic pattern, we have this vitelline vein, so it taking blood from the yolk sac, from the nutrient source into the heart. So another vessels, we have this subintestinal vein, and that's gonna have branches coming from all digestive visceral. So take the blood into the vitelline vein and back to the heart. So here, this is a very, the yellow one here, this one, that's our vitelline vein. So in here, in this area, the center, this one, that's our subintestinal vein. So what happens in the hepatic portal stream is that as it is in the embryonic life, we can see this pattern, the basic pattern, but in the adult life, we can say that there is a merge of one of the vitelline vein and subintestinal vein, forming hepatic sinuses. So this one here, the yellow one, this one, hepatic portal system, develops from one vitelline vein and subintestinal vein. Hepatic sinuses develop within liver from vitelline vein. Let's proceed to the mammalian fetal circulation. So ductus venosus is the bypass of the liver, ductus arteriosus and foramen oval of interstitial septum are the bypass of lungs. So here it is fetal circulation. So in this, the umbilical vein becomes the round ligament of the liver in the adult. So in this ductus venosus is a bypass of the liver. This one here, it is the bypass of the liver and becomes the ligament as we go into an adulthood, and it will serve as the remnant. Placenta, that's where we get our oxygen. So in this umbilical vein, that is our abdominal streams is in the fetus, taking blood from our oxygen source in the placenta, goes back to the heart. So we don't need to filter the blood and filter the toxin out of it in the liver, because our mom has already a liver to filter also. Always bear in mind that what we get to our mother in this fetal stage is detoxified blood, because she done it in her own liver, and we're able to jump the liver. So we're just gonna able to jump in this area here. So we call that one as ductus arteriosus. So that's the bypass of ductus venosus. So that's the bypass of the liver. Now jump into the liver as we enter into that post cava, jumping over the liver, that will become the ductus venosus. So it becomes ligaments as we go into the adult. So as we go into the adulthood. Now in this right atrium, this one, if I want to go to that left atrium, now let's proceed to this area. So the right atrium, so there is a space in here. So there is a hole in here. So that's the atrial system called the foramen oval, where blood bypass the lungs directly into the left atrium. Now we have another bypass in this area, where in the blood ends up going into the heart. Okay, so if I want also to the right ventricle and then goes into the pulmonary trunk, I have another bypass of that lungs that we call the ductus arteriosus. So this one here, if I want to bypass the right ventricle and then goes to the pulmonary trunk, I'll bypass there, and that's we call the ductus arteriosus. So those one, so the ductus venosus, arteriosus, foramen ovale as a whole, as we go in adult life or the adult stage, it then becomes the ligament. So in the embryonic life, we use that one as the. Why is there a liver bypass in mammal fetus? The fetal circulatory system use 3 shunts. There are small passages that direct blood that needs to be oxygenated. The purpose of these shunts is to bypass the lungs and liver. That's because these organs will not work fully until the birth.